You know that feeling? When you're just buried under advice, everyone telling you how to be better, how to be perfect. It's it's a lot.
Yeah, overwhelming sometimes.
Totally. So today, we're kind of stepping back from that. We're doing a deep dive into this really interesting article by Tony Feghali.
Ah, Feghali, okay.
Yeah, and he has this, well, let's say grounded, maybe even surprising take on what makes a coach truly good.
Beyond just the usual metric.
Exactly. So our mission really is to pull out the core wisdom from his reflections, to figure out what makes coaching effective, beyond the degrees and the theories. It might make you think differently about getting guidance.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So where does he start? Does he touch on the standard stuff first?
He does, yeah. He acknowledges the checklist, the education, the experience, the certifications, all that.
Right, the things you'd expect. Table stakes, maybe?
Pretty much. He doesn't dismiss them, not at all. It's more like, that's the baseline, but then he pivots pretty quickly.
Pivots to what?
To failure.
Yeah.
To messing up.
Okay, that's less expected for coaching qualification.
Right. He talks about the power of having stumbled, and not just once, but repeatedly. He actually uses this phrase at least 70 times 7 times.
70 times 7. Wow. That's biblical almost? Very specific.
It paints a picture, doesn't it? It's vivid. So the question is, what's the idea behind that? Why is failing so important for being a good coach, according to him?
Well, his logic is fascinating.
Yeah.
He basically says that going through those setbacks, the product launches that fizzled, the companies that had to shut down, scaling up, scaling down, pivoting constantly.
Messy stuff.
Exactly, the messy real-world stuff.
Right.
He argues that gives you a kind of deep practical understanding that you just can't get from a textbook.
Right. You can read about it, but living it, different game.
Totally. He uses this analogy of taking more punches, which I think is really evocative.
Yeah, it implies resilience, but also knowledge gained the hard way.
Precisely. It's not just surviving. It's understanding from the inside what it feels like to get knocked down, and then, crucially, how you find the will to get back up again. As from those experiences, that's where he really found clarity, courage, and importantly, compassion.
So it's not just about the failure itself, but what you learn from navigating it, the growth that happens in that struggle.
Exactly. Because, let's be honest, the big insights often come when things aren't going smoothly.
Right.
When you're wrestling with a real problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it taps into that desire, I think, that people have for advice that feels real, relatable, not just abstract concepts.
Absolutely. So he really values that lived experience of failure. How does he say that translates into actually helping someone, into the practice of coaching?
Well, he makes a strong case that you can't really authentically guide someone through, say, a product collapsing or massive self-doubt or just utter chaos in their project.
If you haven't been in a similar boat yourself?
Exactly. If you haven't navigated that kind of rough water personally. He gives those specific examples, which helps.
Like the product failure you mentioned.
Yeah.
Reading a case study is one thing.
But actually living through the late nights, the tough calls, the feeling in your gut when it goes south, that imprints a different kind of wisdom.
It must. And this leads him to the idea of pattern recognition.
Ah, okay. Explain that a bit.
Because he's lived through these scenarios multiple times, perhaps in different forms, he starts to see the underlying patterns.
The recurring themes or mistakes.
Yeah, the subtle signs that things might be heading off track, things you might easily miss if you've only studied it theoretically.
It's like a seasoned doctor spotting early symptoms.
That's a great analogy, yeah, because they've seen it before many times. So he can potentially spot pitfalls for his clients much earlier and help them navigate around them.
Okay, that's compelling. But it can't all be about failure, right? What about success? Does he talk about that side of the coin?
He does, and that's really crucial. He balances this focus on falling with his own track record of success.
Like what?
Well, launching companies that actually worked, raising capital, building teams that clicked, even selling businesses, creating frameworks people use.
So he's seen the upside too. He knows what good looks like in practice.
Exactly. He makes it clear he has experienced things going well. He knows that feeling when the plan comes together, when the engine is running smoothly.
Which is important. You need both, presumably. Knowing how to fix things when they break, but also how to build things that work in the first place.
That's precisely the sweet spot he identifies. Effective coaching, in his view, sits right at that intersection, understanding failure deeply, but also having achieved success.
Knowing the fall and the rise.
Yes. the struggle and the breakthrough. He argues that having both perspectives is what really elevates a coach.
Okay, so if that's the foundation, this blend of lived failure and success, how does he describe what that kind of coach actually does for you, what they provide?
He uses a great list of roles: a mirror, a strategist, a partner, a challenger.
Let's break those down. A mirror.
So not just reflecting your words back, but maybe reflecting the patterns they see, patterns they recognize from their own experience or other clients, seeing the things you might be missing.
Okay. And strategist.
Helping you plot the course, drawing on their experience of navigating similar challenges, what worked, what didn't, potential roadblocks ahead.
Makes sense. Partner.
Providing support, but support that's grounded in like a real gut-level understanding of how hard it can be. Not just sympathy, but empathy born from experience.
Right. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt kind of empathy.
Exactly. And finally, challenger.
Pushing you.
Yeah, pushing you. Because they have a sense, maybe from their own journey, of what's actually possible. They've likely overcome similar hurdles themselves.
So they know you can probably do more than you think.
Perhaps. He mentioned specifically, asking the tough questions, the ones that make you uncomfortable. Really listening, not just to the words, but the quiet stuff underneath.
The subtext.
Yeah. And tracking those patterns, like we said, in your thinking or actions, and holding you accountable. Not just to random goals, but accountable to what they sense you're capable of, based on seeing people, maybe even themselves, push through similar sticking points.
So it all circles back to coaching from lived experience, not just the manual. Real empathy, real understanding earned through struggle and success.
That's the core message. He explicitly says that coaching from both theory and that lived experience makes all the difference.
He uses phrases like having walked the bridge from stuck to sharp.
Yeah, and from burned out to lit up. It really speaks to anyone listening who wants more than just, concepts. They want someone who gets it.
Definitely. So how does he wrap this up? What's the final thought he leaves us with?
He poses this kind of reflection for you, the listener. If you're building something important, if you feel stuck but you know you're not fundamentally broken, or if you've fallen down but you still believe in what you're doing, then maybe the coach you need is someone who has, and I love this phrasing, failed beautifully, risen wisely, and still wakes up curious.
Failed beautifully, risen wisely. Wow.
And he adds, someone who has walked the road, missed the exit, crashed the car, and still found the way forward.
That's incredibly evocative. It paints such a clear picture of resilience and learning.
It really does. And he finishes with that powerful image, again, someone who's fallen 70 by 7 times, and maybe found success just as many times too.
So distilling it all down, Feghali's core argument is pretty radical in a way. He's saying major challenges, big failures, the recovery process, these aren't black marks against a coach. They're actually core assets.
Yeah, valuable assets. They create a depth of wisdom, a kind of real-world empathy that theory alone just can't provide. And that can be genuinely transformative for the person being coached.
It really flips the script on what we might traditionally look for.
It does. And it maybe raises an interesting question for you listening right now.
Yeah.
Think about your own life, your own journey.
What kind of falls or big challenges have you faced?
Right. And could there be unexpected wisdom hidden in those experiences? Maybe even the potential to guide someone else someday. It's perhaps worth looking at past difficulties through that lens, reframing them a bit.
That's a powerful thought to sit with. And just remembering Feghali's point, if you've ever fallen down and managed to get back up, even once.
You're definitely not alone in that. It's a shared human experience.
Absolutely.
So this deep dive was just scratching the surface, really. But hopefully it gives you something to think about, the real value of lived experience, both in the guidance we seek and the wisdom we gain ourselves when we navigate the tough stuff.